Hello, friends. It's me, Dwight, from the Broken Brain podcast, and this is one of my RPG reviews for therapy. Today, I'm going to be talking about this game right here, which is Someone Has Died, a silly game about serious business. The reason I'm doing these is because I am more and more specializing into some of the use of gameplay and the use of tabletop role playing games in order to accomplish personal growth, assessing feelings, healing, processing feelings, and other therapeutic goals through therapy, both group and individual, and on your own with your family, with whoever you want to. So, we're going to dive into this in three parts. First off, I'm going to tell you how the game is played. Second, I'll tell you some of the pros and cons, particularly for these applications. And third, I'll tell you presenting issues in therapy applications that I think this game has or that I may have experienced. So let's dig on into it. As always, by the way, you can learn more by going to dwighthurst.com/RPG. That's where you find that. I'll leave that banner up because it takes a little less room and I can hold things here. So, Someone Has Died is a game that was put out by the publisher Chronicle Books. It is designed for 3 to 6 players, ages 13 plus, and lasting about 25 to 45 minutes. Personally, I've found it doesn't always take quite that long. And if you had to throw a few extra players in, I think the game would support that even naturally without really a lot of hacks or changes or anything like that. The premise of this game is that someone has died, not surprisingly. All of the players except one represent people who have been called in to listen to the reading of a will and then to try to convince the executor of the will, which is the other player, that they should get the fortune that is being left. The will specifies that whoever makes the best case throughout this process will be the one who gets the fortune. Technically, you can win by getting the fortune, but this game is really based more upon fun through collaborative storytelling. So you do have to invent reasons why you should get the money, and you have to explain who you are, how you knew the deceased, and things like that. Now, this game, as I said, is somewhat RPG adjacent. And what I mean by that is it does have has the appearance of a regular card game and things like that, but it does have some of the important elements of an RPG. For example, the collaborative storytelling that I just mentioned. The other part is that you have randomizers that are thrown in, which is a big part of role playing. Randomizers give you a little bit of structure to where you have to tell the story within certain framework, and you can't opt out of some certain details. So here's what those are. First of all, you've got cards that say your identity. First thing that happens is the executor will identify who the deceased was, and then everyone else also has one of these cards too. So, for example, it might say something, and the art on this is kind of fun too. It might say something like a visitor from the future, or a little poor orphan, or whatever. Revolutionary War reenactor. So they're all pretty fun. And so one of these is going to be identified. Now, the executor gets to use their imagination by telling you what the fortune is. So if it's, for example, the Revolutionary War reenactor, his fortune might be millions of dollars worth of antique Revolutionary War gear. Or you could get sillier than that and say a whole bunch of, command over a whole troop of reenactors and some type of a gig there in the community, or owning a museum or something. Well, you do whatever you want, but it has to be within that framework. Then you go around and everybody identifies who they are. Once again, there's the randomizers that come in. So here's what you run into. You have to draw a couple other cards. First of all, they have to share what is their relationship with the deceased. So this one, for example, says you recognize them from television. So then you have to come up with a story based off of, well, I saw them on TV and here's what happened. It can be anything you want, but it has to be within that framework. And it also has to involve a backstory. There are some confines around your backstory or the backstory, how you met the person. You can kind of do both. For example, you might be compulsively air drumming the entire time or always. You might be a former extra in Lord of the Rings. You might have been raised in a forest cult. So whatever, these randomizers, once again, give you some structure. So it both shapes and promotes imagination because you have to work within those things. Um, the other kinds of cards, there's one other kind of card that they have to try to randomize and provoke imagination, which is objection cards. The executor throughout this process can give out objective cards when they really like a story or detail the person made up, or when they laugh out loud, or however you basically want to frame that. Once you get one of these, you can throw this out anytime against another player. So you could say, for example, I have an objection. You're blackmailing the estate keeper, the executor. You could tell them, objection, I found a literal skeleton in your closet. And there's other ones like that, ranging all the way from you burp all the time to you are the killer of the deceased. So you basically have all of those kinds of different randomizers that will shape where you're going in the game. So what are the pros and cons of this game? Well, the pros are it's pretty dang fun. I really like it. I played this with not only my family, but also with a social skills group that I do every week. And we've done it a few times and we found it to be delightful. It leads to a lot of fun, a lot of laughing, and it encourages a lot of imagination. And the teens who are in this particular group work all the time on communication and they work all the time on social skills. And this requires some of both. You've got trying to convince someone of something, you've got sharing a story, you've got becoming inventive of how to tell that story. And in order to win, you really have to be quite creative. Are there any cons to this story? Well, another pro to this is that it doesn't have to take very long. And also, it's highly adaptable if you want to kind of shift here or there. It is separated into certain rounds. But if you want to do kind of a hack or a variation off the game, it really does lend itself. The only limit really is your own imagination of what you want to build into it. So those are good things. Are there any cons? Well, I guess I'm a therapist here after all. I should point out that there are many people who find death to be triggering. You could alter the game. You would have to watch out for certain cards. If you have members of your group or family who are really like triggered or have had a recent death in the family, if you're doing this particularly in a therapeutic setting, you probably want to get a measure of that first and say, is anybody feel sensitive to this or whatever, or just to be aware of that. I've never run into this yet personally. This could also be a benefit therapeutically, which we'll get to in just a second. But you could alter it and say someone has, won a sweepstakes or something like that. Once again, you'd have to kind of look through the cards. Some of them reference the deceased or have like you murdered them or something like that. So you'd have to do a little bit of work pre-game in order to do that if you wanted to, or you could use it to develop your own sort of thing based off it. I don't know if Chronicle Books has any other variations of this out. I didn't look that up, but perhaps. So that's something to you probably want to be aware of that because it can be a touchy subject if you're going to trot this over to Thanksgiving dinner or do it in a group of social skills. You want to maybe check with people beforehand, which I did. Now, as far as therapeutic applications, I already mentioned a couple, which is communication skills, social skills, being able to have imagination, and the ever-present need to bond with other human people, to have a sense of community with folks. And so there's a couple of different applications there. I have also used this in individual therapy, particularly with a few younger people. Now, in that one, you have to alter it a little bit because technically you should have at least 3, and the executor should have to decide. What we did is we just kind of made it more about the story and just kind of decided which half of the fortune we each got, since there's an inherent unfairness if one of us was the executor, right? So you can do that however you want to, but it is quite fun to do even one-on-one. And one of the reasons I did it is that it actually helped to process grief in a little way if it's paired with kind of a discussion. So knowing who's in your play group and how you feel personally is kind of important here to do that. But sometimes dealing with something in a silly kind of way can actually help to process real, legit feelings. So I mean, I'd endorse this both for, for fun, but also for your therapy purposes, self-growth, processing emotions. As always, love to hear your feedback on these things at dwighthurst.com/RPG, where you can also learn about things that I'm doing in that area, watch some live play videos of kind of some of the ways we're kind of implementing this. Also download free RPGs that I'm in the process of creating and putting up there, and some other free to low cost resource links there as well. Also building up some groups, not just the social skill group, although you can find that there, but also adult groups that are going to be focused on trauma, addiction, and some other things through the use of development of self-journaling techniques through RPG work, and also character work together in groups. So some of this is new to the field of mental health, and I look forward to your feedback, and also hopefully people out there who'd like to participate in some of this groundbreaking work. Thanks a lot. I'll have another review up before long. Bye-bye.